Thanks, Wayne and Sarah, and thank everyone for joining us today. It's so great to see so many friendly faces out there. Good morning. And it's excellent that we have an opportunity to share the results of our ongoing research project that's really, it's taken off over the last year and a bit. So welcome to our presentation. It is called On-Farm Diversification in Ontario's Prime Agricultural Areas, and it's identifying best practices to achieve farmland protection, farm diversification, and economic benefit. And we'll just take a minute to introduce ourselves, but we will say that we are from the University of Guelph, obviously working with Wayne. And this project and research is supported by the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, and we would really like to thank them for their continued support. My name is Pam Dusling. I am a candidate for my PhD and working with Wayne. And I'm also the General Manager of Development Services at the County of Brant. And I sit on the OPI board as an executive director. And I'm a sixth generation farmer in Norfolk County. And I'll turn it over to Emily to introduce herself.
Great, thanks, Pam. So my name is Emily Sousa. I'm actually a recent RPD grad, formerly Wayne and Sarah's student. Now I am a land use policy analyst with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. I just want to note that this work was undertaken during my time as a student, although OFA has provided support here and there. It doesn't necessarily reflect their policy positions at the time. And lastly, I'm also a candidate RPP with the Ontario Professional Planners Institute. And back to you, Pam.
Great, and I think maybe, yeah, thanks very much, Regan. So I really don't need to explain this to this group, but farmland is a fundamental resource for agricultural communities, economies, and our food systems. So both in the present and in the future, and less than 5% of Canada's land base is made up of prime agricultural land, and 52% is Class 1 soils that are located in Ontario. Yet we continuously lose farmland over time, and most recently, the Ontario Federation of Agriculture has reported that based on the 2021 census, Ontario has lost 319 acres of farmland a day since 2016. So most farms in Canada are family owned, and yet the numbers of small and medium-sized farms are decreasing while the number of large farms are increasing. And these numbers illustrate the difficult challenges facing our farmers and their livelihoods today. So work must be done to preserve farmland and simultaneously enhance agriculture viability. It's no longer enough to preserve farmland. Society must also preserve the family farmer. Next slide, please. So agriculture is changing, and a new generation of farmers are pushing the entrepreneurial envelope by introducing new businesses on their farms within the agricultural area. And some of these may not be related to agriculture at all. These are on-farm diversified uses and intend to support agricultural viability by balancing farmland preservation with economic opportunities. So the provincial policy statement of 2020 and the OMAFRA guidelines on permitted uses in prime agricultural areas of 2016 support this activity. The OMAFRA guidelines outline 5 criteria to demonstrate on-farm diversified uses. 1 is that they must be located on a farm. 2 is that the use must be secondary to the principal use of the property. 3 is that the use must be limited in size to a size of 2% to a maximum of 1 hectare. And 4 is the use can include, but is not limited to, things like home occupations, home industries, agritourism, and uses that produce value-added agricultural products. And 5 is that the use shall be compatible with and shall not hinder surrounding agricultural operations. However, clarity of policy is critical to help ensure stability and growth in this sector. While the guidelines provide an excellent template for interpreting and implementing policy, further clarification at the provincial and municipal levels will be helpful. So our research helps ensure that the policy framework for OFDUs, that's on-farm diversified uses, is supportive to the joint goal of protecting farmland while contributing to the development of agricultural livelihoods. Next slide. So OFDUs can virtually be anything and everything if they meet the 5 criteria under the OMAFRA guidelines, as we previously discussed. So on the screen are only just a few examples of OFDUs across the province, and these include Walters Theatre, which is a musical theatre in Oxford County, the Circus in the Trees, which is a circus school in Norfolk County, and Windmill Lake, which is a water sports park in Huron County. So OFDUs can be very diverse, and each proposal will have different impacts and considerations for the agricultural area. And we featured these three businesses because they are unique examples that showcase just how diverse OFDUs can be with their benefits and challenges, and they can arise from each being in the agricultural area. Next slide. So these OFDUs have many benefits, but ensuring they are result in the balance between farmland preservation and agricultural viability and economic development is key. The 2016 OMAFRA guidelines on permitted uses in Ontario's prime agricultural areas are the first real tool that provide family farmers and entrepreneurs and municipalities with guidance to create on-farm diversified uses. Yet translating these guidelines into local action is easier said than done. This leads us to our research objectives. Next slide. So our first research objective is to evaluate the effectiveness of the policies that allow for OFDUs within Ontario. And that's at an individual farm, municipal and provincial level. The second, OFDUs. The third is to evaluate the effects of the policy on individual farmers. The fourth is to identify best practices for policy strategies for OFDUs for municipalities, the province, and agricultural industries based on the evidence we've collected. And now I'm going to pass it over to Emily to talk about some of our research methods.
Great, thank you, Pam. So this study uses three key methods, which I won't go into detail today, but please note that the main methods we used were surveys, interviews, and focus groups with three main groups, so provincial staff, municipal planners, as well as farmers from all across the province. So this map on the screen illustrates the geography of municipalities and farmers who participated in our study. And as you can tell, we had great representation from both northern and southern parts of the province. So now I'm going to take us through some results. So first off, let's go through some of the survey data. And the first one is contributions of on-farm diversified uses ranked. So farmers and planners ranked the potential contributions of OFDUs from a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the most important and 10 being the least. So make note that the higher the bar in the chart on the screen, the lower the contribution was ranked in importance. What we see is that both planners and farmers see a great economic benefit of OFDUs, including promoting agricultural viability, job creation, farm succession, amongst others. We note that planners, represented by the red bar, ranked farmland protection relatively low compared to all others. The idea behind OFDUs is that they do provide that avenue for farmers and municipalities to balance farmland preservation with additional opportunities to generate income. However, these findings suggest that planners may not be too confident in the current context of policy implementation to feel that farmland preservation is balanced appropriately. So farmers were asked to select all the challenges that they've experienced when establishing or expanding their OFDU. Aside from financial capital, site plan control, zoning, and building approvals were amongst the most mentioned challenges. We learned that most municipalities do not have as-of-right zoning provisions, requiring farmers to either undergo costly official plan amendments or zoning bylaw amendments to establish their uses, in addition to other costly and time-consuming requirements such as studies, site plan control, engineer drawings, and development charges. There are opportunities at the municipal level to alleviate these time and cost burdens for farmers, particularly in ways which may make permitting OFDUs more efficient for municipal staff. So farmers were asked about the conflicts they've experienced or the complaints they've received about their OFDU. The word cloud on the screen shows the most mentioned conflicts or complaints. So the bigger the word, the more often the issue was mentioned. Complaints from neighbors about lights, noise, traffic, or the concern over loss of amenity or farmland in rural areas were concerns commonly mentioned. Using certain quantifiers to help reach a compromise in the impact the OFDU size and scale would have on the community or the agricultural area were also mentioned. This includes number of events per week, the hours of operation, the seasonality, or even the number of guests. Others included complaints about normal farm practices such as flies, odor, dust, etc., and the ability of the OFDU to not impact the ability of normal farm practices in agriculture to continue. So this provides us with an understanding that while OFDUs have their benefits, they do have their challenges for communities, neighbors, and other farmers who may not be diversifying too. Managing these impacts are important to ensure that both OFDUs and agricultural production can be successful. So interviews with farmers provided more insight into the ways that municipal policy and processes have either helped or hindered diversification. So one farmer expressed that in addition to the cost and time required of them to secure the zoning bylaw amendment, the need to attend public meetings and be open to public scrutiny was, quote, excruciatingly difficult. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. In contrast, another farmer expressed how as-of-right zoning was beneficial. Quote, because the whole farm is zoned as that agricultural plus designation, we're able to do those events without having to get any specific permits. That designation allows us to go forward without too much hassle. Lastly, a farmer expressed how as-of-right uses in the zoning bylaw are a valuable solution for agriculture municipalities alike. Quote, we did a rezoning application to allow for many of the things that we do here on the farm, because a lot of the activities we do aren't traditional agriculture. Our goal will be to have right of use because many farms want to do diversified uses, but they either don't have the time or the finances to rezone and fight the township. So instead, they either get discouraged, they do it without approval, or they just don't do it at all. So briefly, I want to share a quote from a farmer that I think represents the potential that we're working towards in identifying these best practices. Quote, there's no discussion between departments. The Economic Development Committee brought planners and departments to our farm to show them what could happen with on-farm diversification. At the same point, I would walk down the hall to the planning department who seemed to be doing everything to stop us. They kept saying, if we allow you, we have to allow everyone. Well, if you allow me, then you've got this is how it's done. And you've got a pathway for the next farmers to come. We've seen people make a living on their farm and not just make a living, but thrive. This is, in my opinion, one of the only ways to truly preserve the family farm. So now I will pass it back to Pam for our recommendations.
Great, thanks, Emily. So what do we learn from our results? Well, we know and recognize that the guidelines are a valuable and useful tool. However, they're currently underutilized by municipal counterparts. Our research has led us to recommend that more outreach, education, training, and sharing of best practices would be of immense value for planners and farmers alike. We believe that updates, additions, and addendums to the guidelines would be beneficial to help municipalities address several key challenges, including but not limited to prioritizing a farm-first mindset, size and scale principles of OFDUs. Municipalities as well have work to do, specifically the need to update zoning bylaws to include as-of-right policies and provisions, utilizing site plan control as a tool and simplifying this process for farmers where possible. Next slide. Here are some high-level recommendations, which we broke down and directed to different stakeholders within specified and concrete actions in our final report. First, municipalities and provincial government and the agricultural community should recognize and value the OMAFRA guidelines as a useful tool. It provides a baseline to interpret policy and open the doors to balance farmland preservation with opportunities to promote agricultural viability for farmers. The province and municipalities could utilize, interpret, and implement the guidelines into local level policy, including training on things like carefully defining what a farm is, size and scale criteria, as-of-right uses, the use of site plan control, and policies and tactics that encourage results for existing buildings, such as heritage. Design specifications, both put out by the province and municipalities, could ensure that the character of the farm is maintained. Municipalities should encourage farmers to have pre-submission consultation meetings with all departments present to learn more about what applications, timeline, and fees may be required prior to applying for an OFDU. Farmers are encouraged to ask municipal staff for pre-submission consultation meetings if this is not offered or put forward, and it should be used as an opportunity for open discussion. Where possible, fees and requirements at the provincial and municipal levels should be scaled back for farmers. And these could include development charges, application fees, site plan control, etc. Next, to enhance working relationships between municipalities, OMAFRA and various farm organizations to provide resources to support OFDUs. These things can include promotion of local farm businesses as destinations, designing toolkits for farmers to understand the policy framework behind OFDUs and the development process. design and provide access to other training or resources for skill development related to OFDUs, such as business planning, succession planning, funding, marketing, bookkeeping, social media management, and event planning. And farmers are encouraged to maintain positive neighborly relations to ensure most successful outcomes for both farm operations, on-farm diversified businesses prior to, during, and after the establishment of OFDUs. So this takes us to the conclusion of our presentation. We'd like to thank you for listening. We would also like to sincerely thank all those who participated and gave their time for this research. And again, for OMAFRA for so graciously sponsoring this important research. So please feel free to reach out to Emily or I or Wayne. Our contacts are on the screen. And you can find out more about balancing on-farm diversification and agricultural preservation in Ontario. And Wayne and Sara, we're happy to take any questions.